Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I am the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. Keith, we've been talking a lot about college. We've been talking about the start of the Western Ultimate League season. And you know what? It just felt like we've been doing kind of the same show for a few weeks in a row now. And it is time to do something totally different. So we're doing something totally different. We're giving Ultimate an Extreme Makeover. This is Extreme Makeover Ultimate Edition, okay? Imagine what this would actually be like if there was actually an Extreme Makeover Ultimate Frisbee show. Well, that's what we're going to try to create today.
I feel like that moment right there, if Ultimate social media was more active, like could be a great memeable moment. Like today we're going to do something totally different. We're going to give Ultimate, and then you could just insert anything that you would say at that way. The big middle finger or free cars for every, whatever the meme of the day
You get a car and you get a car. I love it. So we asked in the Ultiworld Discord for ideas on things we should give a makeover to. And really the goal today is to try to think outside the box a little bit and like come at stuff from a totally new direction. Now, I don't know how like completely insane stuff is going to get, but we will see. I think the goal is to not try to be like, okay, well, we can make this incremental change or we could do this small thing. Like this is about trying to completely rethink the way that things are done in certain ways.
Yeah, Extreme Makeover still has, like when they do a house, right, on Extreme House Makeovers or whatever, they don't build a car, right? They build a house. Like the structure is still the same. They just change how things operate within it. You know what I mean? Like, so we're not going to get so crazy. We're going to be like, we're going to reinvent Ultimate and replace it with, some sort of balloon instead of a disc.
Disc hoops. You cannot go out of bounds at all. Ever.
Yeah, we're not going that off off into space here, but we're looking to make some pretty drastic changes, and hopefully the results will be much healthier for what the outcomes would be than what you get actually on Extreme Home Makeovers, which if you've never heard is seems to be pretty damaging to all parties involved, except for the television network that makes all the money.
So Keith, where do you want to start?
Ooh, where should we start? How about Matt Bennett's offense? I believe that was one of the suggestions that we got. We need to Extreme Makeover Matt Bennett's offense. That was not even suggested by Pavel Yanis, one of our Discord's most notorious trolls. But yeah, maybe we shouldn't start there, actually. It's too much work. There's too much work, Matt Bennett, to fix your offense.
What is it that needs to be fixed?
The whole thing. Have you ever seen him play? It's terrible. I'm just kidding. I'm just riding with the trolling here.
This man, I remember at Centex a couple of years ago. It's been a while now. I mean, 6-7 years. I don't know. But he throws back-to-back lefty low release backhands onto the break side with like a force flick mark into the end zone for the score. And I was like, wow, this dude's unreal. So just do more of that. That's the makeover. I'm
not sure I've ever seen a player nutmeg more people in competitive play, I think, than Matt Bennett. But we like I said, we just don't have the resources to do the full makeover for Matt Bennett that's necessary. So we'll have to go in a different direction here. Well, let's talk about something that a lot of people are talking about right now. Let's talk about the rankings, bids, the structure of competitive play, and how it rewards teams for their success during the season. It's been a big topic on Twitter this week after we tweeted about the New England men's fortunes right now. They have like 6 teams in the bid earning range in a traditional rankings year, but will not be receiving 6 bids. We don't know exactly how many bids they'll get, but it's definitely a lot less than 6. And every year there's always complaints about the rankings and bids and how this stuff is run. So I think this is a perfectly good starting point.
I like it. And I'm going to make you go first.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, where have we been here? We've gone to, we started out with the egalitarian method, right? Just 2 bids for everybody. I think we see the minor upside there, but also the costs that has to a competitive season. We want to reward teams for the way that they play and regions for the way they play. I think that there's been so much talk over the years about probabilistic bid assignments, but I'm not sure that quite gets to the level of being far enough for what we're talking about, like how teams are awarded postseason opportunities. So I know you're making me go first, but I'm going to go to an idea that you've been a big champion of, which is a play-in tournament. Now, this would restructure how bids are given out, because teams would actually compete to get into the event head to head and less on an algorithmic playing field. So, you could have a big pre-nationals event, or alternatively, similar idea, but different logistics, super regionals. So there would be an additional qualifying event to get into nationals, and your regular season success / how you perform at regionals could allow you to bypass that event to get directly into the national championships. So it could be, if you're thinking of a play-in event, it happens the weekend before nationals. It's the next 20 teams or whatnot get to play in for some number of bids to get into nationals, maybe 10, maybe there's 10 spots or something. I don't know. Maybe there's 6 spots. You can figure out the math exactly. They play in, and then all those teams are able to stay and watch nationals as well, because they'll have planned for nationals, and USAU can help provide something to make their trip a little more exciting or affordable, because obviously taking a big week out of your schedule is tough, but ultimately the rewards could be there for it to be an exciting event. You get more fans at nationals, a bunch of really involved players, and people are really excited in the week leading up to nationals too.
Yeah, and I think you have to consider this maybe differently between college and club.
Absolutely.
With club, I would love to see, and I've been beating the drum, to be honest, to have a week of last chance, last bid qualifying event. And what this does is this opens up nationals to another 6 to 8 teams, wherever you want to do it, per division. Let's say you kept everything the simple, like the incremental changes, keep everything the same, only give out 19 bids. Or it's in club, it would be 15 bids, and then the final bid for each division is earned a day or two before nationals at the nationals site by the next 8 teams. Or you could do it however you want. You could do it the team that lost in the game to go. You could use regular season performance, but you get these teams there, and then if they lose, automatically, instead of getting into the tournament, one team will get in. Everybody else gets a VIP spectating ticket. You're still there with your team. You're partying with your team. You're staying in the Airbnb, and you're going to go watch nationals. And you block that time. And you get so many more people involved, and you increase the energy and excitement around the tournament. Now, you could get even more crazy. You could have 4 bids get earned this way and make it a bigger tournament. Maybe there's not enough excitement around that, but the other big thing I want teams to, if they win a TCT tournament, to get an automatic bid to nationals. Done. If you win the US Open, you go to nationals. If you win the Pro Elite Challenge, you go to nationals. Like, yes, are there things that we would have to solve to deal with that? How do you give regions bids and stuff? Yeah, of course. But let's start from that premise, that if you win a big major regular season tournament, that you get yourself in.
How many teams have ever won one of those tournaments and not made nationals?
Right.
Maybe an international does it. Did Revo won the US Open once, right?
Let them in.
They're going to come national. I can't find a reason not to do that. So
why not?
I'm sold.
If an international team wants to come to the US Open and play so competitively that they win, give them a spot. What's the problem?
Is it harder for college kids to be at the nationals location for an extended period of time than it is for working professionals?
I mean, a fair question. I think
I don't know the actual answer. I don't have
a matter
of
resources and time. I think a lot of college kids have to work around finals or whatever. I mean, a lot of the kids are done, but some schools go into early June, so that can be a little more tricky. I think the thing with college that you might want to do is like more like a super regionals type deal, where you have, the West and the East and maybe the Central. Maybe you have 3, maybe you have 2, maybe you have 4. But instead of having 10 different regionals, you go from that qualifying level to this super regional format where, if you win your region, maybe you automatically qualify. And then the rest of the bids are allocated based on regular season performance, kind of like they are now, but they get allocated to these super regions.
Right.
And then you qualify through the super regions to then get to nationals. And I think if you could also give teams a bye out of sectionals straight to regionals so that you don't add a lot of extra travel. It would still be a 2 tournament qualifying process for the teams who would likely be in contention to win these tournaments. But what this does is it lets us get more comparisons across regions. It lets stronger regions outperform. And, let's say, who knows, the Atlantic Coast sends 4 teams, or, like New England men's. There'd be a perfect example this year where they could go in, so one of the teams qualifies directly, and then you have, 3 or whatever bids at the super region, and maybe they take all 3. They beat out the Metro East and the Ohio Valley and the Atlantic Coast or whatever. I would love to see a total shakeup in the approach to college, but college feels like it's in a better place than club, which is kind of a club season still doesn't feel great.
Look, I've long said that club season is boring by comparison to college. It's just the regular season is not super meaningful and hasn't been. I think that also one of the challenges with club, A, you have 3 divisions, but B, those 3 divisions are not as close to being in the same place to me as in the college divisions. I think that, obviously D1 and D3 do have some of this going on where it's you kind of have to plan differently for the different divisions because they're in different places. But it feels like club men's, club mixed, and club women's are just not in the same place. So the same structures don't actually always make sense for all 3 divisions. And that is a real challenge to designing something that works for the trio, which I do think that, some sort of play-in tournament could function in the right way for all 3 groups. I've advocated for, in some of our previous, hey, what are some crazy ideas to change up club? I think that I've pushed for the short season. I think we should have a short season and a smaller nationals. I think I could really envision a 6-week season with a smaller nationals field. The reason for smaller nationals is to make the regular season more meaningful. Less free rides. Like, so many teams basically know they're going to go to nationals when the season starts. If there were 8 or 10 teams at nationals, that group gets a lot smaller. I think there's not a lot of teams that can really say, I'm very confident we're going to be one of the 8 or 10 best teams in the country from day one. And then you make the season short. Teams are still going to play prior to that 6-week window. They're still going to play, these early July tournaments or whatnot. Like, they're going to play those preseason tryout events or whatnot. Just let them be preseason events. Like, who cares? It feels like half the teams treat them that way now anyway.
Right. I mean,
so make the season short and meaningful and push teams to be involved in and active during those times for them to be getting in competition, and just make it simpler to follow. Like, it makes it a lot easier to follow. So I'm an advocate for short club season. Let's make it more compact, more action packed, and then smaller nationals. Like, let's have the best teams at nationals.
You know what? I'd have to look at the data to see if this would actually have an impact, but we want to talk extreme makeover. How about no auto bids?
I don't hate it.
Like, why does every region deserve a bid in club? This is not college. If you're a weak region and none of the teams in your region are good enough to crack the top X when we can set the X wherever we want, then you don't get a bid, or you have to qualify through a super regional type setup. Like, the way you could do it is that if a region is too weak, they don't get an auto bid. You have to win your region to get into the play-in tournament. And then you can win through the play-in tournament. I don't see any reason that we should automatically grant bids. Now, the thing is, I think there is a top level team in most regions that would probably mean that this wouldn't come into play. But, there's years when, like, I'm trying to think, what's the last time we had a region that was just really weak, that didn't have a good team?
I feel like
North Central Women's
is exactly what I was thinking of.
Like, you're not good enough. Like, Pop, Heist, not good enough. No bid. Sorry. Like, win your way during the regular season.
And they'll still have a chance to qualify through this postseason structure. I do think it's important that we preserve any team has a chance.
Agreed.
Like
Agreed.
if you formed a team for the first day of sectionals, you could theoretically qualify for nationals.
I
think that's something that it's important to preserve. You and I have both been like, we draw the line at that. Nobody should be eliminated prior to the postseason beginning. I don't want that in college, especially where I do think it's more important that every region gets a bid. But in club, that feels a little less significant because I don't feel like the developmental responsibility is so much on USA Ultimate at that point.
I mean, frankly, the only reason we do regions in club is to like keep costs down, right? Like, otherwise you could do some kind of crazy bracket seeding where you have teams have to meet up for qualifiers and you win your way through some giant 64 team bracket. That'd be another crazy thing you could do. Top 64 teams in the club rankings get into the postseason. You have to play during the regular season. If you don't, and you don't finish top 64, you're out. We have a separate structure for like an amateur level event, basically. And then you have this top 64, and you can either have it all go to someplace and play a tournament where it's, March Madness style, or you could have teams have to meet up and play games. I mean, we're thinking a little crazy here, but the regional approach is simply for cost reasons. It mirrors college because, of course, this sport developed in college.
There is a time when we discussed the idea of connecting league play, like local league play, and club level play. And one of the like downsides to the idea you're presenting here is by restricting the amount of teams that get to compete in the postseason, you risk losing people who are just no longer interested in playing club. You hurt the membership potentially for USA Ultimate. We know that playing in tournaments is the primary driver for most people joining USA Ultimate and getting memberships anyway. Although perhaps that's a problem that we're going to tackle later in this conversation. I don't know. But we want to provide playing opportunities for people to be USAU members. And maybe there is something to having that amateur competitive division. I don't know whether that's between league and club. Like there's another layer that we need to expose there and make separate from elite level club. I don't know. But that's potentially a way to do that and still preserve USA Ultimate's need to have club memberships, need to have people signing up in order to fund the organization, but without it being interfering with the competitive excitement of an elite club season.
Let's move to another topic. And of course, you can get in touch with us anytime at DeepLookPod on Twitter, deeplook@ultiworld.com. We look forward to hearing your extreme makeover ideas. Here's one I feel pretty strongly about, Keith. Coaching infrastructure and how we get coaches into the pipeline and, certify coaches, etc. So one of my number one gripes about Ultimate, and this has been a problem for a long time, and it's probably a bigger problem now than it's been in some time because of the pandemic. We just don't have enough opportunities for people to play. Now, there's a supply and demand issue. How much demand is there for Ultimate Frisbee, youth opportunities? I mean, it's not clear that if there was an enormous demand, the market would fill this and we would have, private entities offering Ultimate Frisbee camps and clinics and things of the sort.
And we have some, but very few.
We do. But, you look at the places that have been successful, and it's either been places like Seattle where, schools put Ultimate teams in at the middle school level as you must, right? Seattle public schools must offer Ultimate Frisbee. And as a result, we've seen enormous growth in Ultimate in Seattle at the youth level. How about in the North Carolina area? Well, we have an incredible number of players, elite players, giving back by going and coaching in the high school level. Strong area universities that have good teams that have kind of, and that works both ways, right? They get good players in, and the fact that they're good means that it like creates more excitement around, high school kids wanting to go to UNC and play on the Ultimate Team and whatnot. But in so many parts of the country, the infrastructure is so weak that there's just a couple of schools that have a team. Now, here's the thing. Who are the coaches of high school Ultimate right now? If I just ask you that question, what do you answer to
that? Some mix of of high-level players, local area players, and parents, I would say. Maybe staff, I guess, too, school
parents,
staff. But
I actually don't think I agree. I think maybe there are some parents here and there who have a kid who's like super dedicated and they step in. But I think broadly, Keith, it's either current or former players, and including like mostly elite people who have been really kind of dyed in the wool Ultimate people. But here's the thing. What is the vast majority of coaching at the youth level? And I'm not talking about Ultimate, I'm talking about general sports. It's parents of kids who are like playing for the first time. It's like my friend in New York, his son is 5. No, he's 7 now, I think. He's 7, and he's coaching the baseball team. He doesn't play baseball. He doesn't know baseball. He's never played baseball in the past. Maybe when he was a kid, he played Little League. But his kids on the Little League team, they go out, they throw the ball, and he's the coach now of the Little League team. This is how it works in most cases. So my big thing is we must massively, massively, massively reduce the kind of barrier to entry in coaching. It needs to become way easier to get things like lesson plans on your phone with an app. Here's what to do for X age range. Here's the drills to do. And we need to massively reduce the costs and get more people to say, yeah, I'll go do an Ultimate Frisbee team at, my kid's middle school, or I'll coach the high school team. I'll do this. We got to get away from asking the elite players who are already giving so much time to the sport as players to have to be the ones to also coach these teams. Sure, they can coach YCCs or take the elite high school teams, fine. But we need to stop requiring like expensive memberships for coaches. Why do we need you don't need a membership to be an Ultimate Frisbee coach. You just don't. Like, yeah, we need to worry about things like background checks. I understand that. We can still do that, but that should all be subsidized. We should make that as easy as possible. And in most cases, we should try to get local organizations to handle that instead of trying to run everything through USAU. It makes no sense. We have to get just random everyday people who don't really know very much about Ultimate to become the facilitators of growth in the sport. Parents need to be the ones who are going to coach the Ultimate team for the 8-year-olds. And until we get there, we're never going to see the big growth at the youth level.
Well, I think one of the challenges there is that, if you look at the example of your friend feels comfortable being the baseball coach, which I imagine is as much a job about babysitting as it is about actually teaching baseball. But because your friend is familiar with baseball, has watched baseball, potentially played baseball as a child, like if that opportunity were to be a sport that's in a comparable position as Ultimate, like, I don't know, rugby or the field hockey or Quidditch, I don't think your friend would be as apt to jump on board, right? Your friend would be like, I don't really even know. I've never even watched that, or I've seen that once. Like, I know what it is in passing. Like, I don't know if people would jump on with that. So I think it's hard if you're not exposing people enough to the game to feel like they have some familiarity with it, some knowledge of it, so they can feel like, oh, I can step in and monitor what's happening around this game. Because I think there's some level of like, you want to be teaching the sport and making sure that the sport is progressing in some way. And I don't know that USA Ultimate having, better resources about the basics of the game is necessarily going to do that. We need to be introducing parents to the game earlier on, whether it's before their parents altogether, or when they're seeing their children interact with content around Ultimate, or whether they're seeing Ultimate in their own entertainment venues. They're going to an AUTL game or something like that. They need to have some level of comfort and familiarity with Ultimate, I think, to be put in that position. I also think that, the more importantly than not overreaching with elite players and asking them to do that, it's and we're going to talk about this thing again, elite volunteers. The people who are in the trenches, like day in and day out, who are like being asked to carry the weight all the time in local communities, like those are the people that it's like, man, do I wish that they could distribute some of this work that they are doing. And yeah, a lot of those people kind of asked to be put in that position. It's something that they're good at. They like multitasking. They like having a lot of things to do. But it obviously can cause burnout. So I do think that, finding ways to disseminate their responsibilities across multiple people, including parents who should be engaged with this kind of activity, would be really helpful, even more so to me than protecting like elite athletes who want to take on this side gig.
Well, the other thing is we need every local disc organization that has a community of, in a city that's bigger than 50,000 people to hire a full-time person to operate programs. And I know that there's some big communities that still have volunteer-driven boards and don't even necessarily have a paid staff member to do things like host tournaments. That has to change because you see ROI literally immediately. This is like been the experience of all of these local organizations that have finally hired an executive director. And in big enough communities, you could also hire a specific person just to do youth programming. We have to create the infrastructure. We have to have a middle school state championship, even if it's for 2 teams. You start somewhere and then you start to go out to these middle schools, run a clinic and say, hey, if you like Ultimate Frisbee, like we're trying to take this flyer home to your parents. We're trying to start a team at this school. We're looking for a coach. We have all of these resources available for you to coach. It doesn't cost you anything. Here's, and you work with the schools to try to make these kinds of things happen. It's work. Don't get me wrong. It's work. But right now, what is the approach that we take? It's very gate kept. You have to have a membership to play at high school states. You have to make the kids buy a membership. The coaches have to buy a membership. So we have a good structure at the high levels with all the private schools with the kids who've had an ultimate team for 25 years in Seattle and Boston. But where is the structure beneath that? Some places are doing a pretty good job, but we're not even coming close to getting the numbers up in the way that we need to. And you can look at the stats and you can see it. We need a completely different approach. I was just talking to somebody from a local disc org, and they said that YCC being this like overarching primary thing for youth competition is killing Youth Ultimate, that it's too much focused on this elite top end, and we don't have pathways for other kids to get involved in Ultimate, either through the high school level or through a club scene that happens in the summertime where they can play at local tournaments. So, I don't necessarily know. It would be a total talk about extreme makeover. How about we completely throw out the YCC as it exists and make it a qualifying in tournament like we see with the club championships? That would be something relatively extreme, but maybe that's what we need.
Agreed. And it also would provide, potential additional playing opportunities in local areas, get more local disc orgs involved. I'm for that. One thing I think that we've done a good job at in this arena is I do feel like there is a culture around Ultimate that encourages players to give back to the community through coaching. Like I do think that obviously North Carolina and Seattle have kind of led the way in that front, in size and scope. In large part, I think because of not just creating that culture, but because there's organizational structure to help provide and get those opportunities into the right hands. And that's the thing that I feel like we can get in other communities. I think there are people who would be willing to do some more of the coaching. I don't necessarily think that there's like a throttled supply of people willing to do some limited coaching if they have the right support and structure around them to help them do that. So I think that is where USA Ultimate and local discourse need to be able to partner together to help design something that makes sense. And YCCs has certainly been something that we've heard criticized pretty frequently in how it influences the rest of the development of youth ultimate structure throughout the country.
I mean, I'm just imagining I live in Inwood in New York. It's the northernmost neighborhood in Manhattan. It's the biggest Dominican neighborhood outside of the DR in the world, and big baseball fans. I mean, you go out on a spring and summer day, and 8 baseball diamonds all filled with games happening, umpires, the whole deal. I mean, it's a serious deal. There's like big time leagues, and I'm like, why can't we have, like, if somebody created an ultimate Frisbee league for little league kids, right? So let's say 7 to 10-year-olds. And you said, we're doing ultimate Frisbee and we're playing on this day in Inwood Hill Park. And you marketed it to in the neighborhood and online, on the groups online, Facebook, whatever. You're telling me that you couldn't get people to sign up? I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that Inwood is the place for this, but like, we don't even have that. Where do you go play as an 8-year-old? Where do you play Ultimate? There is no option. We have to create these options. And again, I know there's like a push-pull with supply and demand, but there's literally zero supply. How do you don't even know where the demand is. You have to try. And all I ever think about is what's going on in Vancouver right now with Elevate, and they're killing it, making 7 figures a year in revenue, offering kids camps and clinics for Ultimate. And like, sure, you can say Vancouver is a particular market, but like, it's not an impossibility that if you go out and you say, hey, Ultimate Frisbee, we got this thing, that people are going to be like, oh, that sounds fun. I like Ultimate Frisbee, or the kid played at church, or the kid played at camp. But we just don't even create those opportunities right now.
If we all feel like the game is compelling, like when people play it, they have fun. So the hard part is getting it into people's hands and getting people to experience it, and then providing them opportunities to continue to grow and play.
All right. Next up, Keith, what you got?
Well, this should we go directly into another one of the topics we brought up, which was the youth to adult player pipeline? It feels like this is a natural segue directly.
I agree. That. I mean, I think we've already sort of started
to talk about that. But we both started talking about like, how do we get people into the youth pipeline? Well, then the question becomes, how do you keep them playing so that they're continuing to play all the way into adult? And then boom, now they're in the cycle. They're going back. They're being the coaches, or their kids are playing and they're coaching the 8-year-olds or organizing leagues or whatnot. How do we get people to continue down the conveyor belt towards their adult playing career? It's definitely something that I think is not talked about a lot. Like, I think people just kind of expect it to happen on its own. Like, if we get people to play Ultimate in their youth, and then in high school, they're naturally going to want to play in college, or if they skip out on college, when they see a summer league, hopefully they'll sign up or they'll want to play club. Like, we kind of just count on the community to do it and for it to happen on its own. But maybe there's an actual better structure that we can put in place that helps guide people through these different areas, whether you're going to college or not. There's one of the challenges with Ultimate's diversity has been, because it's funneled through college, that leaves you with a very specific subgroup of people in America. Like, there are a lot of people who do not go to college, do not have time in college to do a club sport. Like, that is just a very small group of people. So this is also a big issue with creating diversity, is how do we access these people outside of this pipeline and get them into it?
Well, what do you think? I mean, how do you like the model as it stands right now? Right now, what percentage of college players stop playing Ultimate after college?
That's a great question.
5%?
Do you think it's that high? I don't know.
I think there's a lot of players.
I think it might be lower. I bet you there's enough people who like play league at some point.
And I think league totally counts.
Yeah, I think league counts here.
In fact, I think we need to focus on that and not on whether they're going on to play on Pony. Like,
yes,
that's not the people that we need to care about here. Are there opportunities to play? And in general, I think it's okay. I think it would be a good idea for Ultimate to start to treat the approach to, let's say, like adult club leagues, or just like adult summer leagues, right? They happen everywhere, right? All over the country. But they're primarily, you must seek them out. You have to know you want to play Ultimate. You have to search it in Google. You have to say, okay, I'm going to go and play.
Or it's word of mouth. Like almost everyone I know at Summer League either played in college or was brought by somebody else in the Summer League. Like literally said, hey, come with me to Summer League.
100%. And so what if we treated it more like we were marketing a product on Instagram that we wanted to sell? You're not just going to assume people search for your product and find it on the internet. You're going to go and you're going to buy Instagram ads and you're going to get people to buy it. Have people experimented with this? Fun adult recreational league. Learn Ultimate Frisbee, meet new friends. Link. I'm not saying that it's going to necessarily work, but there are entire businesses that operate by running adult rec leagues in various sports, including in some cases Ultimate. And like we're not really trying for the most part to reach those people. And I think we could try a lot harder to do that.
Is that still a hot thing? When I was in Atlanta, I remember a bunch of those companies sprung up and they were hosting kickball league, softball league, all that kind of thing. And like it felt like there was a rush of companies trying to glom on to like young professionals, getting them out in the city and playing in the park when I was in Atlanta. Obviously, that's not going to be the case in places that aren't as metropolitan. But certainly, I think that that's an approach that local leagues could take. And I think that the responsibility right now is on the local leagues. And that probably is for the best. I do think there are also tools that are becoming available to local leagues that probably weren't there 10 years ago. One of the main ones being semi-pro competition. That is a marketing vehicle for local leagues. If there are any semi-pro teams that do not have an established relationship with their local league, then that feels like a huge failure and something that should be rectified immediately, because that is the channel, right? People discovering the game and then it works both ways too. You get players who are local league players who are suddenly potentially fans for semi-pro leagues, and the semi-pro leagues can provide a marketing vessel for local leagues. People come out to a game or they see posters for the game and you're like, well, I want to play. Where can I go to play? Boom. You got to send it right to the local league link.
We don't even have USA Ultimate staffing booths at these games to do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Think about that. 2022, we don't have that. It is so insane when you step back and you think about that. I just can't believe that we don't do simple stuff like that would be good marketing, because you're right, Keith. And you don't have to try to get 25,000 people to sign up in a year. Like get 50, then next year get 100. Like let the snowball start rolling. But we don't have an access point. If you go to a game and you're like, oh, I want to go play, you go to a PUL game and you're like, this is so cool, I want to go play. Number one, you might not have an option to go play if you're a kid. And number two, there's no like messaging around that happening at these events. Like USAU should honestly even consider paying the semi-pro leagues to have somebody there whose job it is to try to talk to you, like a giant sign that says, do you want to play? Talk to us. And then they like get you connected with the right people. I completely agree.
I wonder if there's something to the idea that like league should not be the only playing opportunity for people who want to explore. I mean, I don't know if that feels like a big commitment. Now, I can't think of other sports where this is the case, where, I think of when I think of going to play rec league basketball or soccer or whatever, I think of signing up for a league. I don't think of an event. Maybe it's because there's not, people want to know they're going to be committing to something. They want to sign up with a group. Maybe there needs to be more opportunities for play for, people outside of Youth Ultimate to play one or two events or whatnot, to see if they like the game, to be a part of the community briefly. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, because it's not something I feel like I see in other sports. And maybe there's a reason for that I'm missing. Maybe it's the effectiveness of that type of marketing is proven to not be at the level that makes it make sense.
I think the casual entry point is going to be pickup, though, right? Like you need to have accessible pickup games, and maybe again, same thing, like try to market them to get people involved. And then people can say that I want to play league, or maybe they get interested in playing at a higher level and they want to play club. Just making those levels more clear and less exclusive. A lot of times pickup games are kept quiet or are only for elite players. And obviously there's a place for that kind of stuff, but you also need to have places where it's like welcome for people to just come in and not be very good. People need a chance to just play in the first place.
Ulti World sponsored pickup games across the country.
There it is. So we're already kind of getting to this, but like marketing the sport, do you have other thoughts on how we can market the sport? And maybe this is more of a question on like the national level or on the broadcast side. What do you see as ways that we could do an extreme makeover on our marketing approach?
This one feels like it ties into so many other pieces. I mean, I feel like back when I first started on Deep Look, like one of my big things was we should be not worrying so much about emphasizing elite club ultimate and worry much more about emphasizing college ultimate, because I think that's easy for people to grab onto, to be excited about, because you don't have to be a fan of ultimate to want to root for Texas to do well at a tournament or whatever. You don't even have to know what ultimate is. You just see, oh, Texas is playing. I want them to do well. I feel connected. You have these built-in brands that you don't have to pay your way into being a part of, basically. Like they already exist. I still have some belief in that. I think it's a lot harder to get people to care about, the Texas Tasmanian Devils or whatever club team you have, rather than having them care about, Texas Ultimate, about Tough or Melee. So I think that's an easier avenue, but I want to think bigger than just, marketing club, because I think that has kind of, we've had this two-pronged approach to marketing Ultimate. At the top, like which I think has been a big part of USA Ultimate's push, of the semi-pro league's push. Let's get the best players out in front of everybody and show them how cool the game can be, show them the stars that are in this game now, and let people be attracted to Ultimate by that. And then at the bottom, the grassroots growth. Hey, let's get it in schools. Let's get kids seeing this so that when they grow up, they're like, oh, I like Ultimate. I played Ultimate. Maybe I'll join my high school team or my college team or whatnot. Like those to me are the two big marketing pushes for Ultimate, at top down and bottom up. And we kind of just talked about some opportunities in the middle in the last segment, talking about, how can we get people from point A to point B in that pipeline. But I do think that, do we feel like there's been success from this top down approach? Like, do we feel like being on ESPN has led to people discovering and entering the game of Ultimate? Do we feel like there are people who've stumbled upon Ultimate while flipping through the channels and be like, wow, this game is really cool. Maybe they fired off a tweet about it and then has actually gone out and joined their local league or their college team? Like, I feel like I've not talked to anybody who's had that experience. I have had a few people who said they've been exposed to Ultimate through the AUDL. That is an area in which I can say I've seen people or talked to people who said that is how they discovered Ultimate. And I've also seen people online say they discovered Ultimate through Brody Smith.
I was going to say that. So
there are ways to do the top-down approach, but I don't feel like we have done that very well with USA Ultimate. I think we've invested a lot of resources in doing it, and I don't really feel like it's paying out dividends. Do you?
We're on what? We're on like year 10 of ESPN. I think it started in 13, right? So this is the 10th. This is the 10th year. Where has that gotten us? It's gotten us some glossy looking highlights. It's gotten us a couple games on ESPN2. One of which seemed to have like at least an impact enough that people were tweeting about it. But I track the ratings. I track the social impact. Like, are people tweeting about it? Honestly, it depends a lot on the time slot, and mostly it's gone more or less feels like unwatched. Now, obviously people see it. And I don't know what the alternative is if you're trying to reach a large audience via television. There may not be an alternative. But on the other hand, is it worth the investment and the money that is going into that versus what could be spent in other ways? And I don't know, it's tricky. Brody was seen as like a unsavory character by many in the Ultimate community. I think a lot of people would have been upset if USA Ultimate had, partnered up with Brody Smith to do a video series about how to start playing Ultimate. But, on the other hand, that probably would have yielded a lot of new players in Ultimate. So I don't know where you go now. I think, it's hard to just capture virality. You can't just go out and just be like, we're going to go viral with this thing. But I think that's, if we're talking extreme makeover, I think just completely abandoning television broadcast as an approach that we are trying to use in order to look good to new people or to impress whoever probably makes sense at this point. What I don't see what we're getting out of that deal. And so if we're going to try to market, like, let's just completely abandon that option and spend $150,000, $250,000 a year figuring out how to invest in more kids playing at the middle and high school levels, for example. And, there's hire some consultant to come in and figure out, like, okay, we're going to start a TikTok, USAU thing. We're going to do Instagram ads. We're going to put highlights in front of people on various social media platforms. And who knows, like, try something different.
I think also that one of the challenges here is that the club model does not make sense to the average consumer in the way that the pro league model does. Like, when I see people responding on social media to a news story about one of the semi-pro league teams, or a clip on ESPNW's account or whatnot, I see people saying, like, "Whoa, I didn't know that there was Pro Ultimate." I never see people say, "Whoa, I didn't know there was Club Ultimate," because it doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't track. Like, they don't assume that Club Ultimate is kind of like a stand-in for a pro league. You know what I mean? Right. So right. I think that has always been a barrier. So even if people watch, a great club game, they watch Fury and Riot on ESPN or whatnot, they don't think about it like, oh, I'm watching professional Ultimate. Like, I think it just doesn't click for people in that way. And so that makes that top-down approach also not work. I get the idea here. I get the aspiration. You want to see if you can find that magic moment, like what everybody, I feel like every sport is chasing what happened with youth soccer when the U.S. women's national team was just the big story, and you saw the big youth soccer boom. I feel like every other fringe sport is trying to do that. Maybe I think skating had a similar thing. Skateboarding specifically had a similar kind of thing. I think snowboarding had some of that with, like, Shaun White. Like, if people like exciting stars, so I get the idea of, like, okay, we have amazing athletes. We have great competition. Like, if people see this, they'll want to be a part of it. But I don't know that the connection right now is there. And so it's incredibly resource intensive for us to continue to try and put so much into this basket. Would these resources be better spent trying to get into the Olympic Games, or do we feel like these are prerequisites? Do we feel like we have to establish legitimacy, as I know everybody makes jokes about it online, in order to have a platform to get into the IOC? Maybe. Do we feel like that's necessary for us to be taken seriously when we go to high schools or elementary schools and try and get into their PE programs? Maybe. But if it does not feel like it's necessarily the best expenditure of our limited resources. Like, how many full-time regional youth coordinators can be hired with what we spend on the ESPN contract every year?
We don't know anything about that, how much that costs or whatnot. But the thing that the people at the top of the sport are looking at is the Olympics. Like, that this is the ticket. And I know there's a lot of skepticism among, engaged Ultimate players, and in even some cases, like, outright disdain for the idea of trying to get into the Olympics. It's a corrupt system, et cetera, et cetera. I personally disagree with that pretty strongly. Not that there's not corruption. There's definitely corruption, but I think you have to look past that stuff and recognize that this is the pinnacle of amateur sports, and you get an audience built in, millions of people that you wouldn't otherwise get. And if Ultimate has to do Ultimate 4s on artificial turf under the blistering sun of Los Angeles in the middle of the summer, but that's the ticket to get into the Olympics, I think you got to do it, because we've never been closer. And the thing is, here's the good news. So there's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is we have no infrastructure to support any kind of influx of interest in ultimate frisbee from the Olympics.
We really do.
The good news is that we're going to know probably by next year, at the latest 2024, that we're going to be in. And not that, 4 years or 5 years is really enough time to develop an entire youth pipeline infrastructure, but it's enough time to at least get ready and be like, okay, like we might have a lot of kids knocking on the door in summer 2028 that say, hey, I want to play. I saw Ultimate on TV. How do I play? And you have a fall camp ready to go in your city. So I understand the approach with the Olympics, because even if you only get in once, you're never going to get a better opportunity to market the sport to literally millions of people around the world. You're just never going to get that. It is going to be a like once in a lifetime opportunity to tell the story of what is ultimate frisbee, who are the players who are in ultimate frisbee. These are some of the people that we want to highlight, and you're going to work with NBC Sports on developing a package that explains ultimate. I mean, it's a dream scenario. And, is it going to suddenly burst into being track and field or whatever? Probably not, but you're going to get a lot of new people interested, and I can see why the goal is there.
And I do, unlike you, I do harbor some concerns about the nature of being a part of the Olympic environment. I have a lot of misgivings, more than ever. Like the more I understand about the way that the IOC is run, but also the impact that the Olympics have on communities that they're in, the more unattractive I find that prospect. But I can't deny the growth, and I might be willing to eat that cost of being associated with an organization that I think has a lot of problems in order to achieve that growth, especially because I think one thing that Olympic growth provides that maybe you're not going to get through almost any other channel is the potential to grow in other places outside of that, college educated American pipeline that we're in right now. If other countries have an interest, particularly countries, that have a different cultural makeup than the US, like I can see that being a pipeline for other types of people to get more involved in Ultimate. Being able to compete at a sport that's fairly young, that doesn't require a lot of people or a lot of resources to be a part of, like that, it could be attractive to other countries and could help speed up the development of their old Ultimate programs and diversify and grow in scope the Ultimate community beyond just like, oh, are we feeding kids into the American Ultimate system? Like, I think that there's more to it than that the Olympics offers that almost no other channel offers us.
The other thing is, it's not like you hear the bad stories about what's going on in the Olympics. And there've certainly been in the past, bad consequences for like the heavy-handed building of stadiums that then just get mothballed. But, like in LA, they are already undergoing a $250 million infusion of money into developing like underserved youth sports programs in Los Angeles. Like, this is non-negligible stuff. And there's like many positives. And I think there's been a lot of lessons learned about bad missteps in the past. And so I think it's, I'm not going to claim to be an in-depth expert on the effects of Olympic Games in various places, but the IOC has a legacy of being a little bit tarnished by corruption and other kinds of money grubbing problems. But I think there's still, like, in my opinion, it's watching the Olympics is a wonderful thing. Like, it's awesome to watch these top level, mostly amateur athletes have this opportunity to shine on this global stage that you don't otherwise get. And I think it would be very exciting if Ultimate was a part of that.
if we go to a next topic, I feel like both of the other topics that we have slated tie directly into this. So I'll let you pick which one you want to go to next.
Yeah. So why don't we go to the one that's more specifically directly connected, which is like, how much should we care about other sports governing bodies giving the stamp of approval to Ultimate Frisbee, whether that's varsity status in high school or it's NCAA status at the college level, or it's IOC, not just recognition, which already exists, but, getting into the games once or even for good. Is that something that we should pursue or care about if it's possible?
I feel like the obvious answer to most people is yes, right? Like, we will grow through being a part of these major organizations that enshrine us into institutions of sport, whether it's NCAA at the college level, whether it's high school state associations or national associations that get us into schools, get us that sweet youth access that we've been trying to get for so long. Helping codify that is important and valuable. But I will always caution people to be mindful of what it means to take on additional stakeholders in Ultimate. You will have to concede some control over the vision of the game. And the community, in my opinion, has had a lot of trouble doing that. Like, they do not like that. Everybody wants the game to be preserved in their vision of the game. And when they hope that, if we join the NCAA, it's their vision that the NCAA adopts and moves forward with. That is probably not going to be the case. The NCAA is going to have their own vision, their own agenda of what Ultimate should look like, and they will have some control over it when you decide to join them. So you have to know whether or not that is worthwhile for you to give up, even without necessarily knowing what direction they'll want to take the sport in. If NCAA gets involved, and let's say they want to make the sport 10v10 and played on football fields. Right? If they decide to do that, they have some sway to do that. And you won't be able to control that. If they want the sport to be refereed, right? If they don't want it to be self-observed, like, they get some influence over that. And you have to be willing to give up. We don't know what they would do in that situation. Is it worth it for the growth? Some people would say yes, but I think a lot more people would hesitate when they have to actually think about what it means to take on an additional stakeholder who will have a lot of influence over what Ultimate looks like as it is brought to all these new people.
NCAA status isn't happening anytime soon.
Absolutely not.
So I don't even think we should discuss that. Like, sure, maybe someday down the road we get there, but varsity high school status or otherwise being codified into sports programming at elementary, middle, or high school level, that I think is something that should be on the radar and actively lobbied for by all local disc organizations. I mean, when I've asked people in Seattle, why is Seattle Ultimate doing such a good job with youth? The answer is almost invariably because in the mid-2000s, we got inserted into Seattle public schools because the people leading the Seattle, disc organization at the time, I don't know if it was called Disc Northwest back then, worked really, really hard to make that happen. And it's had an enormous influence. Fields are lined for Ultimate in Seattle at public parks. Like, think about that. That most people are going to be like, what? That is an amazing opportunity, because then you're almost like, every school is like, okay, we have to offer Ultimate. How? Well, we need a coach. We need to tell kids that this exists. And then boom, all of a sudden you have all of these programs and you have a championship set up, and it's this incredible opportunity. Obviously, Vermont has been the one state to make it happen at the varsity level for high schools. I haven't checked in a year or two at best about how things are going up there. We obviously just went through the pandemic, so that's going to probably change the trajectory. But I'm not going to. Let's just be honest. University of Vermont, best they've ever been. Incredibly competitive men's and women's teams. Are we seeing some of that pipeline from high school into the local university starting to be a thing?
And I will say I've seen people from Vermont or neighboring states popping up on college rosters across the country and playing very well, having a big impact. So even beyond just the universities themselves.
Right. So in my opinion, if we want to talk about extreme makeover, like, one of the primary tasks of an executive director at a disc organization or the youth person should be lobbying to get high school recognition and figuring out what is it that we need to do in order for this to happen. And whether that's high school, middle school, it's going to vary state to state. It's impossible to have a one-size-fits-all kind of answer to this. But how much is that even being pursued right now? Probably not very much. I think this could be the number one thing to do to explode Youth Ultimate.
If you had a choice between being in high school state associations or being in the Olympics, which would you pick?
High schools.
No contest.
Not even a question. Not even a question. Think about the infrastructure that it automatically creates to have schools sanctioning teams and setting up games and all of that. There's an athletic director. There's an assistant athletic director. There's the coach. There's the all of the people in the athletic department. Like it would be like overnight, we would see enormous growth, and it would trickle up, if you will, to all of our other divisions. It'd be enormous because you get the infrastructure built in because of the school setting. And also massively reduces the cost for individual players in order to be able to compete.
I was just going to say that the money side of that is huge. I mean, you're getting a much different financial setup around Ultimate than what we see today. Earlier we talked about, having parents be involved with coaching youth players. And I talked about how Ultimate's not familiar for a lot of people. I think that's actually kind of, when people think of Seattle's success, they think of top level Ultimate teams and players. They think of players on U.S. national teams. They think of Ryan and Sockeye. They think of Mixtape. They don't realize that it also means that they have incredibly healthy leagues, and that a lot of people in Seattle are familiar with Ultimate. People who are not top level players, but people who play in leagues or who work at companies that can help share, bring people into that summer league experience, increase the power of word of mouth. There are a bunch of other impacts in the Seattle area because they have this kind of grassroots built up Ultimate culture there. And that is something that I think offers a lot of benefits beyond just is it going to make our elite club team good? Sure. But it's going to make Ultimate healthier in your area to be able to achieve this. Now, obviously it's really difficult. Vermont's a pretty small state. That probably makes it a lot easier for them to get everything together there. But I would not be surprised if we see another state come on board with this over the next couple of years.
8 of the top 25 high school girls teams are from the Seattle area. 4 of the top 25 boys teams are from the Seattle area. This is direct relationship with middle school programs. And then, of course, because there's all these middle school kids coming into high school that play Ultimate and want to play Ultimate in high school, naturally there's been infrastructure developed to support that. And Disc Northwest runs the show for the high school state championships, but it's going perfectly great. I mean, they have split seasons. It's a whole, it's like year-round Ultimate up there. And, as a result, we see tons of everything else just trickles up. Take the top 5% of those players, they go on to play on the U20 teams. Take the top 1% of those players, they go on to play on the U24 and the U.S. national teams. And it just turns out that when you have a ton of kids, 5% and 1% is a large number. We need to do this everywhere. Okay, last topic. Speaking of national teams, how could we make over U.S. national team selection? Right now, the predominant process is to have usually split tryouts on either coast, and coaching staff goes, they watch, and then they pick a team.
Vote. We should vote on it.
Community vote.
Community vote.
Twitter poll.
Twitter. Oh, yes. A social media poll.
Random 4 players selected. Top player in each poll makes the next round.
It'll be like our play of the year. Everyone will agree with whatever the final selection is, surely. I think that one of the challenges here with national team selections is kind of discussing what the goals of this program are. Because I think there's a sense of, is the goal to help grow Ultimate, to help make Ultimate better in our area, or is it to have the most competitive teams? That feels like there's a tension between those two things. And especially, I think, when you talk about the younger you go down this line, the more people care about having representation. Now, the U.S. has been so good that a lot of times we don't have to tackle that because we can kind of do both. We could not take our best team and often still win gold medals. So There's some people who feel like that means we should be doing that. So I think you have to kind of answer that question first. Should it be about developing Ultimate or about continuing to compete at the highest level? So for me, personally, I think the national team should be about competition because there are lots of other opportunities to grow Ultimate. We don't necessarily need to assign the national teams for doing that. Maybe because we're in such a dominant position generally that, you know, there's room for us to try and do both. I can see trying to thread that needle in that case. But, you know, a lot of times people talk about getting representation on the national teams from regions all across the country. From, you know, is it better to take the fourth person from this Ultimate hub who is a really good player, or is it better to take the best player from a non-Ultimate hub so that they can gain the experience of being there? They can raise the profile of their community. They can learn things that they can take back to their community and help better it. Like you hear those kind of conversations come up around the national team. And I feel like that's kind of what this question is generally getting at.
Here's my thoughts. First of all, at the highest level for world championships and the world games, absolutely just pick the best team. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter who you are. Pick the best team. Let the coaches pick the best team. U24s, U20s, cap on the number of players that can come from one state or one area. Max 3. I don't know. Pick a number. But a hard cap. Only get to have 3 Seattle kids. If we lose, so be it. I think, why do we care if we win U20s? Like, obviously the kids want to win, but any kid is going to want to win, and you're still going to have great kids on the team. I don't know what the cap should be, but make a cap. Because what is the point of having, you know, the coaching staff is from Boston and Seattle, and then 60% of the team is from Boston and Seattle. I'm probably exaggerating slightly, but not by much.
No.
And obviously, a lot of the best kids are from Boston and Seattle. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that the team selection is mostly sensible. But I don't think that this should be happening. What's the point of that? That doesn't help us grow the sport. That just, we win by more. Okay, so what? We're already going to just destroy pretty much everyone except maybe Canada and Colombia and the Australia or something. Like, it's not making the difference about whether we win or lose anyway. So let's stop just picking absolutely to max. And I know the coaches aren't doing that. You know, they are thinking about this kind of thing. They're not only picking kids from Seattle and Boston, but like, I would like to see a hard cap instituted. The next thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see more regional tryouts with fewer people. And yes, this would cost more money for us to do this, but you have to qualify out of a regional tryout in order to get to a more national tryout. This would give you a number of things. One, it's cheaper for players who don't have to fly to Orlando. They can just go to their local Boston qualifier. Number two, you can get way more people involved because you can have, let's say, 40 players per city, and you have 6 of them. And then, you know, you have way more players than you would if you have just 2 big tryouts, because the big tryouts are already too big. So we need a way for coaches to see more players and to do more of these events. And you split them up, like split the coaches up. So you don't have to have them all in the same spot. Split the coaches up, let them see and take notes and take video or whatever, have more tryouts happening. And you could do this for the adults too. I see no reason that there needs to be, you probably have to have some kind of screening tool, but right now you have to apply in order to be considered to get a tryout for whatever team. And like, sometimes people who are really good don't get a tryout. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we need to create more opportunities for those players to get seen. And right now, it's just like sort of what feels like it could sometimes be abstract decisions before anyone's even watched tape. So expand the number of tryouts, expand the number of players who get into the tryouts. And then once you've whittled it down from those fields, go to the bigger tryout. And for everything except the very top level of adult competition, have a cap on the number of people who can come from a certain area, and change the focus for U24s and U20s to be development and not just trying to win the gold with the best possible team.
So you kind of want like a talent ID camp sort of model
But I don't want a talent ID camp where the kids have to pay $150 to go.
That's the thing I'm trying to figure out is the money component, because having like people generally don't like when the expenditures of the organization are like totally focused on the top end players. Because most of them are not paying the way. And so if you're going to add cost, who's paying that? Generally the USAU membership, who's not participating in these types of things. So I wonder if there's a way to create playing opportunities by hosting like local events, whether it's like not necessarily a hat tournament, but maybe a hat tournament or a clinic type of thing that also doubles as like an ID camp, so that there's an opportunity, especially for young kids, especially like for the U20 team, foster connections between players in the area. We've seen how the impact that's had on college, that U24 players, now that we have a different selection process, I think that building those relationships with players in your area is really healthy. So maybe there's a way to double that up, but I still don't quite see the minor financial components of how to make this all work.
It's so minor. Why are we worrying about that? Look, here's what you do. You go and you say, all right, we're doing a Amherst tryout, which you can get people from all over the Northeast, New York, Boston. And we're doing that on Saturday. And then the coaches either take the train, or fly down to DC. And then on Sunday, they do the DC tryout. And that's one coach, or maybe two. And then on the other coast, you have a Seattle tryout, or you can do it in Portland, whatever. And then you do one in Denver, or maybe you do it in LA. I don't know. Like, you pick a couple spots and then you do a couple more, right? Maybe I don't know if you do 4 or 6, but you have one in Denver, you have one in St. Louis, you have one in Atlanta, DC, Amherst, what did I say? Seattle, LA, and Denver. And like, all one day. And yeah, like, it's going to cost a little more in flights. But if you're smart about it, it's not going to cost that much more than having one big 2-day tryout weekend.
Well, I mean, you're still going to have the big 2-day tryout, right? Like, you're still going to have a final tryout. So you're not getting rid of that cost. Plus,
maybe you just do one day.
You have the cost of securing the fields for all of these tryouts, plus whatever staff need to be there, like trainers or whatnot, like all the standard things for hosting an event. Like, you multiply that times 8 or whatever, plus the additional challenges of now as a coach, you're committing to not just the one weekend, but now you're committing to 2 weekends, 3 weekends, or whatever.
You're naysaying an extreme makeover right now, Keith, and I guess
that's true. Maybe I'm not supposed to do that. I'm saying that
yes, it's more money,
especially beyond the U20 level. Like, I'm not sure that I see the big upside for U24 here. Like, what is this achieving for the U24 and senior national teams? I get it for the youth level, because I think that there's a lot of value in having young players get together to play together to develop. Like, I think that in general, the community can get behind that, creating playing opportunities for youth players. Like, I think people will be for that.
Just do it for U20 then.
Yeah, that makes the most sense to me.
I mean, and like World Games, they've changed the tryouts, right? So now it's this 2 tryout process, and they cut straight to the team. But players find out less than a month before the next tryout that they've made the following tryout, and then they have to buy tickets, and tickets are like $700. So like, players are bearing this cost.
Yeah.
Right. So this decreases the impact on players. And yes, it does increase the expenditure required by, USA Ultimate. But to me, this is money well spent when you're talking about getting way more kids involved and expanding, your youth opportunities. And you could use it as a chance to market like Youth Ultimate more. I don't even honestly, I don't even know about when U20 tryouts happen. They happened recently. I don't remember when. It was like not, I mean, obviously USA Ultimate posted the dates at some point, but it's not publicized at all. There's no hype around it. It's just like this very elite enclave of kids who get to go and do these tryouts. And there's so many other kids who should get a look.
There should be a Metro East player at all levels. That's my take. The U20 level certainly at U24 level and at the senior level. If you haven't been, somebody on the team needs to be associated with the Metro East.
All right. Well, we are going to end this topic and segment here. But if you want to know more extreme makeover ideas, join us for our subscriber bonus segment. ultiworld.com/subscribe. Less than $4 a month to get access to our bonus segments. We're going to talk about field size and high-level rules adjustments if Ultimate was played 11v11. This was a reader request. We're going to talk about semi-pro player compensation, the state-based organization and affiliate model for my infrastructure folks out there, and maybe club funding models at the team level. So we'll be doing that in our sub bonus. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Centex, Missouri Loves Company, and this weekend's Northwest Challenge in the women's division. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Well, we had some big college tournaments this weekend, and Keith, we had some chaos. Crazy results at Centex and Missouri Loves Company. Where should we start? What was the craziest result for you?
Charlie, we got to start at Centex. Come on. Do. Florida State Seminole Ladies Ultimate. Wow. Shock. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard that not only did they beat Tufts in semifinals, they beat Pittsburgh in the final and won the freaking tournament. Out of nowhere.
You love to see it. I mean, they were in the top 25, Keith.
Yeah, and they went to nationals and they're undefeated. They're still undefeated. They just went to by far the hardest tournament they've been to all year and remained undefeated. Tufts was like a top 6 team.
Yep.
I can't wait to see the tape because this is a shocking result.
Cammie Lamont just throwing bombs. That's what it sounds like from Sean Brady, who was on the ground reporting, and she was killing it back at regionals when I was at Southeast Regionals last fall. They made quarters at nationals, Keith. Like, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised by this team. It felt like, it's fall nationals thing, but no, this team is good.
There's been a Florida State parent tweeting at me for months now. So take your victory lap because you earned it. Impressive stuff. I still am a bit stunned by the results, to be honest.
What do you think now I'm wondering, like, who has Florida State even lost to this season?
Nobody. They're undefeated.
There you go.
But they had not been to particularly competitive tournaments up until this point.
But I mean, they had some close wins. So it's not like, it could have been a different story.
But their close wins
things break.
Their close wins were against the best teams there. I mean, they beat Michigan, who's another top 25 team, 12-5. They beat Northeastern, who's probably a top 20 team, 12-6. They beat WashU 15-6. Like, those are the results that you would expect from a team that is elite.
Yep. And then they beat Tufts and Pittsburgh 11-10 in both games. So, yeah, I mean, shout out. This team's like very much on the radar. And the question is, how high do they go in the power rankings and where does this put them in your mind? Like, I don't think this upgrades them for me to like a semis level team at nationals, but I think they have to be considered a quarters team at this point. Absolutely.
And I wonder, I mean, Tufts, I think, was a team you would consider in the semis contention, and then they just beat Tufts. And
that's
man, I'm stunned. I got to see more. I'm still harboring some skepticism, but it's not really well justified at this point.
Impressive stuff. Also a big surprise over in the men's Centex at a different field complex. Texas wins. No surprise there. They were the best team. They were the 1 seed. McGill coming down from Canada, 15th seed all the way to the finals. Amazing. Apparently, they have a couple of Austin players, who went to high school in Texas that are on the team. And I think that's how they ended up coming down to Austin for this tournament. But this McGill team, suddenly, Keith, we have another elite team in the New England region. And are we going to see McGill show up to regionals with their full squad? That's always been a question mark for Canadian teams, and try to compete for 2 or 3 bids. That's where we're going to be with New England. And there's 6 teams right now that would be bid earning if this was a normal season.
They gave Texas a good game in the final. And they lost by 4 when they played in pool play. I cannot recall a single time that the championship of a tournament was the 1 seed against the last seeded team. Like,
it's shocking.
Unheard of.
And so, yeah, an impressive weekend for them. Obviously, it wasn't a super deep field at Centex this year, but very cool story to see McGill make the run. They were 16. I said 15. I meant 16. So they were the dead last seed at the tournament. And Dartmouth played well. Speaking of New England teams, they beat Florida in pool play.
They did. And they beat Tulane in the third place game.
Yes, they did. So Oklahoma Christian finishing in 5th. Nice result for them.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Makes you wonder how good that team would have done if they were D1 Nationals last year.
It's curious. I mean, I don't know if any of the teams that they ended up beating were of that caliber. So you know, I don't want to get too far out over the skis here.
Well, they're not as good as a team, right?
That's fair. They lost Kyle Henke and others. So they're obviously still a threat for D3, which we're going to talk a little bit about.
Yes, we are. Missouri Loves Company also happened this weekend, just the men's side, and interesting results there as well. Keith, you and I both picked Minnesota to win this tournament over Michigan. Michigan made the final, but they weren't playing Minnesota. They were playing Northeastern, and Northeastern got the win over Michigan 14-11 after beating Minnesota 15-13 in the semifinals. So, I mean, what a weekend for New England. And, you know, Minnesota, they're starting to lose a little shine, I feel like, Keith.
Indeed. And I was a bit concerned about this from their early season performances. It's just hard to walk that tightrope of being a great offensive team and not having a ton of defensive adjustments to go to. Even this weekend, not only they go 3-3, getting blown out by BYU and Vermont, but they played close with Colorado State and Illinois and Carleton. They didn't win any of their games by more than 2. So not great results for Minnesota from the weekend, that's for sure.
So Northeastern goes 6-0. They get 2 wins over Michigan, a win over Minnesota, a win over Vermont. Great weekend all around. Any other notable results for you from Missouri Loves Company, Keith?
Yeah, Vermont hanging tough in there, but I think it's important to note that loss to Northeastern could come into play when we're talking about New England regionals. But I certainly think backed up some of the idea that they're in the mix as a top-level team. You know, they get a big win over Minnesota. They beat Carleton. They hang tough with Michigan and Northeastern. They lose by 6 to BYU, which sounds really bad, but it's one of the best scores that anybody put up on BYU. So I think you got to consider them, top 15-ish team.
I mean, yeah, we shouldn't bury the lead about BYU. I mean, that was the best team at the tournament.
Yeah.
And they didn't play Northeastern, so I guess you can't fully say that, but they crushed Vermont and Minnesota, and, Northeastern played those teams close. I think BYU is probably a 4.5 point favorite against Northeastern. So this BYU team keeps it rolling, not undefeated. They lose the game out at warm up, but they've looked better and better. I mean, these results are extremely impressive. I mean, they absolutely housed good Minnesota and Vermont teams.
And we expected them to get better, right? They're super young. Yes. So their curve for the season is pretty high.
So let's turn our attention to this coming weekend. We have the Northwest Challenge, 12 teams competing in the women's division, and it's stacked field, Keith.
12, man. What a terrible number. Hard to make a good format out of this. And so 4 3-team pools is the best that we can do. But no slouches anywhere in the division. I mean, maybe Whitman will get kicked around a little bit, but there's not going to be a lot of easy W's for anybody here, save maybe whatever North Carolina and Carleton are going to do to teams. But really looking forward to the potential for those 2 teams to play each other. Washington, UC San Diego, really competitive teams. That UC San Diego Carleton game, just watched that from Stanford Invite, and it was a doozy. So I think we're going to get a lot of high-level play, and we get the debut of UBC. So there's a lot to like about Northwest Challenge, which we weren't even sure was going to happen.
Yeah, glad to see that it is. UNC, Carleton, UCSD, Washington are your top 4 seeds. I mean, this is just about as good as we're going to see at Nationals. We're really just missing UC Santa Barbara, it feels like, from the sort of elite group. And, I'm very curious to see what we get out of Colorado. Certainly, what does UBC look like after not seeing them for a couple of years? And, just a lot of great competition to come. And I think, this is going to certainly set the foundation for what we should expect at nationals. And, UNC, as much as we've talked about how great this team is, without Ann Worth, without Bridget Meisner, there are questions. Like, some people think that Carleton should actually be the number one team. UNC is going to have a chance to prove it this weekend.
Should be spicy. I gotta say that Syzygy looks damn good on tape.
They do. They look very impressive, and perhaps we're going to get that UNC Carleton game, Keith. Maybe finally.
We've waited for so many years.
All right. So the other, there was a number of tournaments happening this weekend, but a notable one, Rodeo, happening on the East Coast, and we're going to get some top-level teams from D3 out at this tournament, including some teams traveling pretty far, Keith.
Indeed. You're talking about the creme de la creme of what we expect from the D3 men's division in some ways. Middlebury, Richmond, St. Olaf, those are really the top-end teams. And some competitive, D1 regional level teams that I think will be an interesting kind of measuring stick. But yeah, those are some top quality D3 competition that we'll see. And St. Olaf also in the women's division at the tournament where, they'll get to tangle with the likes of Georgia, SUNY Binghamton, who I think is making their debut after their nationals run last year as a Metro East coach and follower. I'm very curious to see how they'll hold up. Georgia is the number one seed in the women's division too. So there's some interesting stuff happening at Rodeo on both sides.
And so much more to come. 2 more weeks of college action left before the postseason begins.
How did it get here so fast?
It's flying by. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Deep Look. Join us for our subscriber bonus where we do some more extreme makeovers. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.